Hey folks, Paul Roberts here. For this summer's video fishing journals, I decided to focus on some heavy cover fishing, heavy vegetation that is. It's such a common summer circumstance in shallow waters and lakes and ponds throughout the country. So what I did was I chose a water body with the densest vegetative cover I could find. Why go halfway, huh? Well, I did this because such seemingly overwhelming water are first darn tough to fish. But they are fishable. But they also can expose a key facet of bass hunting behavior. A dense jungle of water can actually help us distill things down to what the fisherman's term Bassy in such waters actually means, and this time around to the bass. In this video fishing journal, this is number 21, I'm going to provide the background for what we're going to see in video fishing journals 22 through 24, what I'm calling my jungle warfare series, where we're going to hit that dense soup of a slop water pond and target feeding bass where they're at in a few different scenarios. Okay, what does Bassy water mean? In the wide view, it means bass habitat, which is defined as the space a creature needs to make its living. This, of course, is a much wider story than our focus here, especially considering that largemouth bass are such amazingly adaptable creatures. But in terms of feeding, there is one important thing that bass look for in terms of real estate prospects, and that is the need for space. Personal space, I guess we could say, sufficient elbow room to hunt effectively. Bass, due to their sheer body size and morphology, that's their body shape, need more personal space to operate in than their prey does. Practically speaking, in jungle warfare fishing terms, especially, that space can be seen as the gaps or openings within that dense cover, what anglers call cover breaks. Not to be confused with object or structure breaks that are used for resting or navigation usually. Cover breaks are important avenues for feeding. Small gaps in cover serve to keep prey safe by excluding bass. But those prey fishes also need to use those larger openings too, because that's where a lot of their food is found. What's really bassy then to a bass is where appropriate cover break sizes for those bass and their prey meet, where they come together. This does not often mean a solid wall of weeds facing wide open water. That may be a bit too much of each. What's really bassy are convoluted cover edges, broken cover that hold prey but give the torpedoes, the bass, opportunities to penetrate. The take home here is that the gap sizes in that mass of cover matters a lot. This is in part why a diversity of structure and cover can be so important to look for in our fishing. First, the more nooks and crannies, the more space there is for all the links of the food chain to purchase a toehold. And secondly, the size of at least some of those breaks must be penetrable by hunting bass. So, great cover breaks for fishing attract and hold prey, yet they make that prey vulnerable to attack by bass. This is what makes a spot bassy. Just ask the bass, which is what we're going to do in our jungle warfare heavy cover video fishing journals. So what do good Bassy cover breaks look like? And where might we expect them? Basically, the structural layout of the bottom and the types of cover present determine the size and the types of cover breaks in any given spot. So let's look at some common ones and what causes them. Okay, there are weed lines. That's where the weeds grow and then stop, and you have open water. There are inside and outside weed lines usually. Outside weed lines are usually created by depth changes. That's where the lake gets deeper and the aquatic plants can't root because it's too deep, they don't get the light. Light is often the limiting factor there. Inside weed lines, they're the ones from the shoreline to where the weeds start. And there's a line there often because of wave action that tears up the vegetation in the real shallows. Or in many waters, water level drawdowns can leave those areas high and dry. When it comes back up, they're clean. What you're looking for, again, is not necessarily a solid wall of weeds, but a convoluted or broken weed line. They tend to offer the best odds for fishing compared with those straight solid walls. As you can imagine, those breaks allow bass to penetrate and offer feeding niches for just about everybody. Okay, weed pockets. These are often the obvious casting targets in slop. However, just be aware that some apparent openings aren't. The weed-free water may only be inches deep, making it look like an opening at any distance. The vegetation within those pockets may still be too thick for bass to bother looking for prey above them. We just can't see this from casting distance. This is a greater issue for shorebound anglers, of course, because they can't just go over there and check which pockets are actually open and which ones are solid weeds. Okay, canopy is the term for the roof-like overhead cover that is so attractive to bass, such as overhanging trees, large logs, undercut banks, surface mats, docks, you name it. Surface mats, by the way, are defined by their having large cover breaks, that is open water, beneath them. Many weed types can create dense beds that may look like mats, but are dense all the way to the bottom. This is especially likely earlier in the summer when the plants are still growing. Light is actually penetrating all the way through. You could throw a frog all day on one and not have a bass bother to move for it. Or if one does, a real hot fish, it may simply miss. Good hollow mats are usually formed when the subsurface leaves die off from lack of light. Because the sunlight only penetrates so far. When the vegetation gets really dense at the top, creates a canopy at the top, the leaves underneath can die. Mats also form when masses of dead and floating vegetation that gets blown into areas by the wind, piling up and creating a genuine bass magnet. Good mats may just be the best type of cover break situation for us jungle fishers. Okay, bottom substrate. Changes in bottom makeup, or substrate as it's called, can cause cover breaks by affecting the types of vegetation that can grow there, or by simply not allowing vegetation to take root there at all. Hard substrate pieces such as rock and wood can create vegetation breaks too, that offer corridors for bass to hunt in. It's debatable whether large hard substrate pieces are substrate or cover. They can act as both. As you can probably already surmise, putting this all together, the hard types are the bassiest, especially when mixed in with soft weed types. And they do so by breaking up those beds of soft weeds, similar to the way that large chunks of rock or a fallen tree would do. You should be aware that different veggie species have different growth patterns, of course, that will affect vegetation structure. So, every time you go to a body of water, you'll be surprised at how much it may change. Like all plants, each needs different amounts of light. Milfoil, such a common vegetation nearly everywhere, requires a lot of light. Also, wind can break the stems off, leaving rafts of dead floating milfoil that can form mats. Milfoil can actually do poorly during exceptionally dark, overcast summers, leaving room for more shade-tolerant plants like coontail to take over. Another worth mentioning is filamentous algae that forms surface mats, and they can be bass magnets. Watch for it. Algae mats get blown and stacked by wind, thus helping form a real mat that bass can operate under. Definitely watch for filamentous algae. If it blows to a shoreline that gets warmed up, or into an area where there's prey nearby, even if there's no prey nearby, they love those algae mats. It helps to consider the prey species that bass are targeting, if possible. People often ask me, how do you do this? Short answer, edify yourself on fish species in your waters. Call your regional fisheries folks. They're always happy to help with that sort of thing. Talk to other fishers that share your waters. And keep your eyes open for the little fish while you're out and about. The most direct way is to check stomach contents of the fish you harvest, if you harvest any fish. And I have another direct way that you'll see in Video Fishing Journal 22 called bluegill hunters. There are two main prey types in our heavily vegetated pond, and they're also top forage in waters all around the country. The sunfishes and the crayfishes. Bass, being predominantly piscivorous, though, are generally geared for fish prey. But on the flip side of the predation equation, the energetic predation equation, sunfishes are particularly challenging for bass to capture and handle. Sunfishes, on the flip side, are geared for evading bass. This counterbalancing of capabilities goes a long way in explaining why bass can't just feed wherever and whenever they please. They must wait and watch for sunfishes to become vulnerable to attack. Prey is not food until it's been caught, handled, and swallowed. Our job in Video Fishing Journal 22 in particular is to insert ourselves into that energetic equation. Okay, crayfishes are the other major prey type frequently targeted by bass. And you should know that crayfish don't need rocks to scratch out a home. All crayfishes use crevices called retreats to hide in, to remain safe. But they can dig their own into a range of usually firm substrates, or they'll improvise. Some make their livings under sunken logs, and others within dense vegetation. There's a third type of prey as well, worth mentioning here, because they are so common in vegetated waters, and that's dragonflies. Although dragons are mostly pursued by smaller subadult bass, in some waters adult bass will hunt them too, even focus on them. In fact, I'll be doing a video on this interesting behavior because it's exciting to see, for one thing, and it's one that gets us thinking about the energetics that underlie, even control fish feeding behaviors. How cost-effective each prey type might be to hunt down, capture, ingest, and digest. Is an insect, and one that's not easy to catch, worth it? Apparently in some waters, yes. Why? What's up there? Okay, the fishing. First, a forewarning. I'm calling these video fishing journals jungle warfare for good reason. This is not relaxing fishing, especially in this pond. I could have actually done this, exposed the rudiments of bass habitat at the other extreme in a coverless swimming pool type of water body. In fact, we could have done this in any water body, for that matter, that bass make livings in. But the summer season is upon us, and so many anglers are so daunted by such densely weeded water that I wanted to share that kind of fishing with you. And I must say, it's addicting. I've got the jungle warfare thing going this summer. So here's the forewarning. In my fishing, I can be something of a pig for punishment, okay? I once suggested to you all that if I were to mention beating a dead horse in the description of a video fishing journal, that you might just want to avoid the pain and pass on that one. Click away. These jungle warfare journals, however, will be more like the beating of a live horse. It wasn't all a pretty scene. I actually think I held it together rather well, despite all the bleeps I've ended up having to insert during the editing. For bleeps, I decided to go with a nice, gentle chime. And I've pretty much spared you the tirades and sobbing fits. Let's just say I didn't channel the soft-spoken painting instructor Bob Ross on this one. One bonus was that we'll have the pond all to ourselves. Even the bank fishers and bird watchers picked up and ran. Forewarnings aside, I think these efforts will be worth your time. The story of the underworld of this pond starts to come together during these outings, fleshing out, in quite literal form, in fact, some insights into how these jungle bass are making their livings and how that affects our fishing. The whys beneath those whats and hows. In Video Fishing Journal 22, we'll be asking those bass to come up, taking advantage of their penchant for surface feeding and therefore vulnerable bluegills. We'll do this using hollow body topwaters, the so-called frogs, which, by the way, are misnamed despite what they're molded and painted like. To most bass, most of the time, topwater frogs mimic surface feeding bluegills rather than frogs. In Video Fishing Journal 23, we'll go down into that jungle after them by flipping/punching, flunching, I guess we could call it, a sort of do what it takes sort of mentality, especially from a float tube. And in Journal 24, well, it's a surprise. Something interesting that explained some bass behaviors I was seeing while filming these jungle warfare journals. I'm still filming that one, so wish me luck. Okay, that's some background for our next video fishing journals, the Jungle Warfare series. Numbers 22, 23, and hopefully, I'm pretty sure, 24. So, man up, woman up, we're going in. Don't hook yourself. Come on. Ow. Okay, you're gonna have to bring gloves next time.